What is going on? I want to welcome you from Half Court. For today, we have an emergency podcast, some breaking news out of the Pistons world. Malik Beasley, per Shams Charania report that just went live here on Twitter. Malik Beasley is currently under investigation by the United States District Attorney's Office for allegations of gambling and betting on NBA games, on NBA action, NBA games and prop bets specifically, sources told ESPN, which is a serious development. According to Shams, the Pistons were primed and were in place to put him on a 3-year, $42 million contract, which would have fit right in the mid-level exception. But unfortunately for the Pistons, they are going to have to go into free agency and seemingly head in a very different direction, because now with Malik Beasley facing these very serious allegations and this very serious looming investigation, a lot of things change for the Detroit Pistons. And unfortunately, a lot of things change with Malik Beasley going forward. So before we kind of get into like the Pistons implications and, kind of like some of the big picture stuff that kind of looms with, this breaking news, I do think it's fair to read, the statement from Malik's attorney. I do think giving him that benefit is the right thing to do. Uh, Quote, an investigation is not a charge, Beasley's attorney Steve Haney told ESPN. Malik is afforded the same right of the presumption of innocence as anyone else under the U.S. Constitution. As of now, he has not been charged with anything. And that can be true. However, one thing that is really, really difficult about this type of thing is, first of all, if it got to the U.S. District Attorney's Office, that means there's smoke. And when there's smoke, a lot of times that doesn't mean there's confetti. It unfortunately means there's fire. And this is one of those situations where now his whether he's innocent or not, this is what really is unfortunate. Whether Malik Beasley did this or not, his future with the Detroit Pistons is in serious jeopardy here. Like, it went from all signs. I tweeted just yesterday that the momentum was heading towards the Pistons re-signing Malik Beasley and bringing him back to Detroit. Apparently, Shams just went on ESPN, and the allegations, according to the investigation, is that the gambling allegedly occurred during the 2023-24 season. So this was when Malik Beasley was a member of the Milwaukee Bucks. So obviously, I know a lot of people have already been, making the joke of, oh, well, he was clearly scamming in the playoffs or a bet. I just don't think that's the case at all. But listen, let's just talk about it from the Pistons perspective really quickly, because I think the speculation on Malik, the person, and a lot of those things, I just don't really know how much we can really do of that right now. Let's start from the Pistons side. This sucks. Let's just not, we don't have to put makeup on a pig here. Let's just be honest. This sucks. He had the greatest 3-point season in the history of the team. He was a very, very well-liked figure in the organization. He's a player that they were trying to bring back. Like, they had seemingly a real momentum towards a deal in place as recently as a day ago. And then all of a sudden, we start hearing more and more rumblings about the Pistons becoming in play for Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who there's been a lot of discourse on Twitter and, on social media in general about Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Let's just get one thing out of the way. He's a really good player. Like, solid two-way player, would be a great addition to this team, would be a really good, person to fill whatever gap is left by Malik Beasley. And that's what makes it so difficult right now. I mean, it's not that the door is completely closed for Malik Beasley to return to Detroit, but let's say he's cleared, right? Like, let's say he's cleared of all of this. First of all, it's not going to happen within a week. This is going to take a while. If this is an investigation that's being conducted by the United States District Attorney's Office, this is something that's going to take time. There's more than likely going to be interviews that have to take place. There's going to be records that are going to have to be accessed. There's going to have to be all sorts of things in order to come into place. The problem for Malik Beasley and the problem for the Detroit Pistons is they don't have time. They can't wait for this situation to really develop, especially with when this news broke. Because guys, it's not like free agency is a few weeks out. We are about 36 hours from the beginning of free agency, under 36 hours. It's 6 p.m. on Monday night. So we are very close to the beginning of free agency. And that's just when free agency officially opens. Isn't it conspicuous how once free agency opens, there's all these different deals that begin to trickle in, all these different contracts that suddenly are agreed upon? That's because they're being talked about right now. And so if you're Trajan Langdon, as much as you appreciate and really value everything that Malik Beasley brought to the table, you have to move on. You have to look externally and go, okay, well, we have to upgrade our roster. And so that's why Nickeil Alexander-Walker becomes a real play here for the Detroit Pistons. And listen, like when you talk about like what he brings on the court, like I don't think this would be a massive downgrade because, first of all, I don't really know if you could even call it a downgrade. It would just be a different type of player. Like Nickeil Alexander-Walker is more of a 3-and-D player, whereas Malik is like a 3-point sharpshooting specialist. Well, a guy like like a Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a 3-and-D specialist. He's a guy who shot 38% from beyond the arc in Minnesota. On top of that, he was always on like some of their best, like perimeter players whenever he was guarding, for Minnesota. Like he was entrusted with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander throughout the playoffs. All things considered, I actually think he did pretty well on Shai during that time. So, there's a very realistic chance that he comes to Detroit. And I think there's a lot of things where, he's just a natural fit. In terms of Malik Beasley, however, he'll probably take up that slot for that mid-level exception that would have been Malik Beasley's, because all signs, again, according to Shams, were that the Pistons were heading towards a 3-year, $42 million contract. Now, with that no longer being the case, if Malik comes back, and that's right now, unfortunately, a big if. That's going to have to come down to this investigation. That's going to come down to whatever the NBA determines, because there's going to be whatever the U.S. District Attorney's Office investigation is going to be. And then there's going to be the league office's investigation. And I imagine they're going to be working hand in hand, going to be collaborating very closely throughout this process. I imagine that this is something that they're going to be, looking at very closely together. Having said all of that, though, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be able to come back anytime soon. And if he were to come back, it would probably be on another like 1 year, $6 or $7 million deal. Like the stars would have to align really in order for Malik to come back. So when you talk about the unfortunate aspect of this whole situation, Malik obviously was a beloved figure both on and off the court in Detroit. He instantly won over the heart of the fans. He instantly, became one of the, favorites within the locker room. He was someone who really produced at a massive level for the Pistons. And he seemed like a guy, by all accounts, who was going to be a Detroit Piston for a long time. Really, it felt like the only thing that could get in the way of Malik Beasley being a Detroit Piston was the unforeseen circumstances, was those unknown twists and turns. And unfortunately, this is where it comes. And look, this is what's really unfortunate now is I've covered the league like in person. Like I've only done 2 seasons now. I've already seen 2 players that have had their career in jeopardy because of gambling allegations and because of investigations. And the unfortunate thing is these guys gave up so much like when you talk about like, like the number one story and the cautionary tale, has been Jonte Porter. And he gave up tens of millions of dollars in potential career earnings. He gave up a spot, in the NBA and the opportunity to play basketball professionally. I mean, not only is he banned from the NBA and that path is closed forever, he probably is not going to be able to play, internationally ever. He's probably going to have to face some jail time. Malik Beasley, obviously, this is very early. We just found out about the investigation about 45 minutes ago. Here's one thing I can say pretty certainly about this Malik Beasley situation, though. If this is indeed, whether this is true or not, Malik has seemingly cost himself $42 million here. That's the unfortunate piece of it all. It's on pause, sure, but a lot would have to happen in 48 to 72 hours to unpause these negotiations and to move forward with Malik Beasley as a Detroit Piston. And so look, not only is Malik's, future with the Pistons at stake right now, his professional career is at stake right now with these type. That is the levity of allegations we are discussing right now. This is serious. So, this is one of those situations, unfortunately, where Malik did this. I see in a comment, like, is this a conspiracy or is this something that Malik, if indeed, again, I want to throw out all the qualifiers. We are, innocent until proven guilty, all those things. Having said all that, when you find yourself in this situation, generally there's only one person to blame. The United States District Attorney's Office doesn't generally do these types of things completely out of nowhere and completely on a whim. And so that's where it gets really interesting for the Pistons, because it changes a lot of things. It seems like, another report from Mark Stein and Jake Fisher is that the Pistons are likely to move on from Dennis Schroeder. It seems like they have less qualms or less concerns about the ball handling now that Jaden Ivey is going to be back in the lineup. Also, seemingly, if you bring in a Nickeil Alexander-Walker, you could potentially replace some of that and replicate some of that as well. But it does make you question, could someone like a Tim Hardaway Jr., is that someone who could potentially return to Detroit now that this situation has transpired? It really makes you question if a guy like a Chaz Lanier, who the Detroit Pistons just drafted and with the 37th overall pick, if he can shoot the way that he did in college, is he someone who's suddenly going to have an elevated role with this Pistons team that he didn't quite expect? Because if you go and watch the tape and put it alongside Malik Beasley, it's a very serious, it is a very serious overlap there. They look very similar. Now, Shams did just tweet out a statement from NBA spokesperson Mike Bass, quote, and it's a very short quote, but quote, "We are cooperating with the federal prosecutor's investigation." Whenever an NBA spokesperson's quote is that short, my immediate thought and I don't want to overreact. My immediate thought goes to, uh-oh, that's not a great sign. That's a little concerning. So the league is aware. The investigations are beginning all around. The questioning is going to begin. And at least for the moment, it looks like Malik Beasley's future might not be with the Detroit Pistons. And so now, when you talk about the next season outlook, assuming that Malik Beasley will not return, this makes the question of, well, okay, how can you replicate that volume? How can you replace Malik Beasley and still have that desired outcome of improving upon last season? And that's where the pursuit of an Nickeil Alexander-Walker becomes paramount. That's where getting creative and trying to pursue guys like Asante Aldama becomes imperative. That's where it makes you wonder if Indiana, they still seem to be all signs pointing towards them going towards paying the luxury tax. But it makes you wonder, does it make them more inclined to reach out about, a Miles Turner and see if they can get that type of deal done. It makes you imagine, because Trajan said about a week ago, the plan is for the Pistons to not be very aggressive. And I imagine that they're not going to change course very much. I imagine Trajan Langdon had a plan in place in the event that Malik Beasley was not going to be back in Detroit. I imagine, however, that he did not envision that plan taking it in place at this time for this reason under these circumstances. And that is where it gets really difficult and it gets really tricky. So that's where you really are going to see like a test of this front office and, of this organization, of kind of like how they backfill that, like the strength and the solidarity of the lineup that you have in place. And like, listen, like there's just no getting around it to a certain extent. Yeah, man, this is a tough blow. This stinks. Malik Beasley was a fantastic player. And yeah, so to answer your question of like, how does this shift the offseason plan? It changes them almost entirely. You have to move on to plans B through D. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker's price only keeps getting higher and higher. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those prices where more than likely he's going to be around the mid-level exception. Like if we're looking at like what Nickeil Alexander-Walker is demanding on the market, it is about what the Pistons would have paid for a Malik Beasley. Perhaps a little higher, but generally like right around that area. So more than likely, if you're Detroit, you are just massively shifting your like your focus and your resources, your attention. You're just moving and pivoting completely over to the other direction. So more than likely for the Pistons, unfortunately, this just means that Beasley's probably, as of today, as of right now, the likelihood of him being on the opening night roster, it's just not very high. It's just not. I hate to say it, but I just think that those odds are dwindling as this investigation unfolds. So we'll learn and we'll see, but unfortunately, man, this is just another cautionary tale of guys who are, jeopardizing allegedly, their careers over these types of things. I mean, hopefully for Malik, he can clear his name. He can come out and be proven innocent. And this is something that he can move past and move forward. But unfortunately, when you make this type of mistake, and if he indeed did make this type of mistake, it's not the type of mistake that you can just forget about, move on, and you could say, oh, well, we'll learn from it, because unfortunately with the NBA, this isn't a 3 strikes you're out situation. This is a 1 strike and you are way out. And when the district attorney's office gets involved, this becomes a very different conversation as well. So now I instantly start to, evaluate what Tim Hardaway's free agent situation is going to look like. I kind of envisioned him going to Brooklyn for a little while. I kind of wonder if, he's open, if that door is completely closed of him coming back to Detroit. I'm very interested to see Chaz Lanier's performance in Summer League, see where he's at on both sides of the court, and see if at all he'd be NBA ready, if he'd be able to come in and fit the rotation. I imagine he's going to have a little bit more of a role now than he envisioned having before the season, or probably Trajan and Biggerstaff envisioned have. An investigation isn't going to be quick. If he's cleared, most teams probably won't have a spot for him by then. No, you're probably not wrong. I mean, there will be spots, like people can always clear, spots at the bottom of the rotation. But the unfortunate thing is, even if let's say a team does have a spot for him, right? They're certainly not going to be able to pay him this. Not at all. In fact, unfortunately for Malik, if he gets signed closer to training camp, he's going to be fortunate getting back to the amount that he earned last season with Detroit. So the unfortunate thing here is, even if this is just an investigation and that's all it turns out to be, unfortunately, Malik Beasley probably is out $42 million here. Like, this is a very, very costly occurrence to happen. And whether Malik is innocent or guilty, again, I'm not going to be making any comments on that. All we know is that the district attorney's office is launching an investigation, and I do not think they would be doing that if they did not have any evidence. So, yeah, I mean, if it is true, or Kent Booth said, if this is true, Malik let down the city. I mean, the unfortunate thing is if Malik did this, he let himself down, man. I mean, that's the part that stinks here is that it doesn't just cost him, it costs other people as well. So that's the thing that really sucks about these decisions. Again, if there's if there's anything that's a potential silver lining here for the Pistons, is that this happened now and not a week from now. If this happened after the massive wave of free agency, Detroit would be in real trouble, and they would have to probably look at making some trades. I would imagine that they would have probably had to try and go to the league office if the investigation, was found liable, and there was probably going to have to be some, form of difficult conversation to be had and looking to get out of the contract. So this is from Grant Afsith. He's a Dallas-based reporter covering the NBA. So I don't I'm not saying don't trust this guy, but I'll say we can kind of take this with a grain of salt. According to Grant, Karis LeVert could be a potential replacement for Malik Beasley in Detroit. As it stands now, multiple sources tell RG that Alexander Walker is favored to land in Atlanta, while LeVert is trending toward ending up with the Pistons. But with Beasley's situation opening up unexpected cap flexibility, things remain fluid. Additionally, the Hawks are also in the market for more shooting. I think that personally, we'll see what happens with Alexander Walker. That's just one source's information and situation on it. Karis LeVert is certainly someone that would be interesting to look at. He's definitely not the shooter that would be that would certainly fit that role. But I see someone say trade for Derek White and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Okay, so one report I saw earlier today about Derek White, as much as I love Derek White. By the way, if you ever want to talk to a true Derek White, aficionado, Eric Vincent, my guy. Shout out to Eric. He is the biggest Derek White fan that you can find on the internet. But Derek White, according to reports, the Celtics would want like a Mikal Bridges type package in order to go get a Derek White off of their roster. Like, they would really have to be wowed. And I don't know if the Pistons would want to give up that type of package for that type of player. So yeah, no, Ethan, this might have opened up room for Chaz to make the rotation easier, might have some long-term benefits. Yeah, I mean, for the Pistons, like you have to look at, you kind of have to look at those like silver linings, or you kind of have to, consider some of those things where, like how could this, how can we turn this into a positive? Because unfortunately, in professional sports, whenever these types of things happen, you just have to keep moving. You have to carry on. Like you have to focus on, okay, well, how can we turn this into a positive? How can we flip this on its head and not let this crumble whatever momentum was happening in Detroit? Because let's be clear, like I don't think this necessarily, fully changes the outlook of next season. But if there's like something that we can most certainly be sure of, it's that this definitely changes what this team will look like. It definitely changes whatever approach the Pistons will have. It might even change the style of basketball they play next year. This will certainly have a short-term impact on the, on the quality of shooting that is on this roster. But that's where you think about the, all the other implications and things like that. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special commenter here today. My guy Motown Noah. He says, "I'll be the brave voice." And say Malik should be allowed to gamble as much as he wants. NBA witch hunt. Oh, this comment made my day. Okay. First of all, Nick, I love you, man. Thank you so much for hopping in. For those that don't know, Motown Noah, the legend, one of the OG creators in this space. I literally wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. He was one of the inspirations that I had to start creating and to start doing what I do. And I just want to shout him out for that, man. I really appreciate you hopping in. Really hope you're doing well. That comment was genuinely freaking hilarious. Unfortunately, I don't think the NBA will take that stance. But yeah, man, Nick, really glad to see you in here. Seriously. Beasley was our only other consistent offensive player. Ivy is not him. Okay. Well, I think Ivy was more consistent in other areas than Beasley. Like Beasley was definitely our most stable and consistent shooting presence, but I definitely think there's other areas where Ivy can contribute. So this certainly changes dramatically the outlook and the outline of the fabric of what this team is going to look like next year. So that's where these next 48 to 72 hours are really going to come into play and like are really going to be interesting to watch. We're going to be talking about it a lot here on the podcast. I actually have a podcast that's going to be uploading later today talking about some of these things. Man, though, is it immediately outdated with all this news. I would have to record like a big caveat at the beginning saying, hey, before we get started, a lot has changed. So definitely going to be really interesting to see how this unfolds. Be sure that you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss anything that comes in the days, in weeks of the NBA offseason. The one thing you can say about the NBA, even sometimes if it's for not as fun reasons, you can never say that it's boring. You can never say that it doesn't keep you on your toes. There's certainly lots of twists and turns that can come along the way. And all those twists and turns we're going to be talking about right here. So with that being said, thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you guys next time from Half Court, and be sure you're subscribed.